Jazzcast Pros.
Hello, this is Igniting Hope Radio, brought to you by the Buffalo Center for Health Equity. So how do we address self-sufficiency in this space, and how do we help the average person that's low wage to no wage earner become medium to high?
So you say, well, how do I go from mopping the floor, taking out the bedpan, to that $60,000 job there? We got to be willing to pull up our sleeves, right? Get on our knees and work our land, right? Which is hard work. What if it takes you 5 years to become a nurse and you're 30? So that means you got the next 40 years reaping the benefits of the hard work you put in for 5 years. And then while you're a nurse, you say, wait a minute, we don't have any nurse practitioners who are Black at this hospital. Then I say, well, great. I'm going to go on and become a nurse practitioner, making $80,000 a year. What does that mean for your children? What does that mean for your grandchildren?
Welcome to Igniting Hope Radio, where we realize the differences between equity and equality. Here at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity, quite frankly, we don't want equality, we want equity. Here in Buffalo, New York, 12 years of life is lost by each person living in specific areas of Buffalo because of their race. 0% of health should be determined by where a person lives, such as education, unemployment and job security, food insecurity, housing, basic amenities, and the environment. We want equity. The only way to change hearts and minds is through emotional engagement, to get people behind it, and continuously support the concept with facts. This is our aim and our mission weekly as you join Pastor George on Igniting Hope Radio. And it's your host today, Kimberly Slugarambe. Pastor George won't be joining us today, but I'm confident in saying that we have even just equal special guests. Dr. Underwood is no stranger to the Buffalo Center for Health Equity and the Igniting Hope Radio listeners. Dr. Willie Underwood is the Executive Director for the Buffalo Center for Health Equity. Dr. Willie Underwood is an MD, MSc, MPH, and is a board-certified urologist with nearly 20 years of overall urologic surgery experience, including more than 10 years focused on robotic urologic surgery. He was elected to the American Medical Association Board of Trustees in June 2019. He's an expert in healthcare disparities and healthcare policy. In addition to co-authoring more than 120 peer-reviewed publications, book chapters, and published abstracts, he has received millions in research funding from the National Institute of Health and holds a U.S. patent for co-developing a biomarker for prostate cancer. Last but not least, Dr. Willie Underwood is the co-founder of KAPS, that's capital KAPS Biotechnology LLC, who is conducting a larger validation study of their new and novel prostate cancer biomarker. I'd like to introduce to everyone Dr. Willie Underwood as we dive in our weekly dose of hope.
Hello, everyone. And Kimberly, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Greatly appreciate it. So let's have some fun. Let's share some information. And let's move our people forward.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Underwood, we just celebrated our Black History Month with an event at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity, which was moving forward towards action and change, pretty much embodying the term Sankofa. And so when we look back at the historical events that has happened in the African American community, not mistaking or overlooking the abolition of slavery. Even when we look at the Fugitive Slave Law, then we look at the Civil Rights Act of 1965. Some may argue that we have regressed instead of progressed even since the Civil Rights Movement. And I want to talk to you, Dr. Underwood, or rather you talk to the people today about the notion of self-sufficiency amongst African American people. How can we help our current adults find freedom and at the same time make their children free?
That's a wonderful setup for this, right? So let's think about this. Congressional Budget Office looked at America in 1979 and America in 2019 and reported that the income inequalities has grown in the U.S. in the last 40 years. That means that the richer quartile has grown in wealth by 110%, while the bottom quartile had only increased 20 to 30%. That means their income after inflation has only increased by 30% since 1979. When you look at African Americans and you compare us to whites, and we begin to look at our income and how much we make for the most part $20,000 less than whites. Now, at the higher income level, their average or median income, their median income is 400,000, and ours is 200,000. So at the higher 1%, we're 200,000, making 200,000 less than they are. In the lower quartiles and the medium average, they're making at 74,000. Our highest is at 54,000. We're talking about the fact that we're not progressing. So when you ask the question, are we slipping backwards? The answer is yes. If you're not moving forward and everyone else is moving forward, then mathematically speaking, you are losing ground, right? So then what's the solution? The solution is our motto has to be, don't be lazy in learning. Don't be lazy in learning. Information is the key. As Jim Rohn says, and this is true, I've seen that true in my life and the people that I've mentored, learning is the beginning of wealth. Learning is the beginning of health. Learning is the beginning of prosperity. Learning is the beginning of democracy. Learning is the beginning of freedom. All values, all prosperity, all virtue starts with learning. Knowledge, wisdom, and understanding begins to lay out the framework. For example, Solomon said in Proverbs 28:19, he who works his land will have abundant food, but the one who chases fantasy will have his fill of poverty. Okay, what's our land? Our land is us. Our land are the things that God has given us, that we're born with. So what does that mean? He who works his land will have abundant food. What is our land? When you start looking at these biblical terms, as everyone had land, right? So all of us are born with some unique same things. And what is that? We have a mind, we have a body, we have the ability to think, we have the ability to learn. So when we work that land, when we work those things that we were given, no matter where we start, no matter how poor we are or the situation that we're in, but if we can learn to work that land, to cultivate it, to learn it, we will have abundant food because there's opportunity everywhere, right? But if you don't have knowledge, if you can't learn, if you haven't figured that out, then you miss it. Then we miss everything. And then we're stuck in a situation where we're expecting and desiring someone else to feed us, someone else to do something for us. And that's a trap, right? That's just government sabotage. That's a trick, right?
Wow.
As Malcolm X said, you've been had, you've been took, you've been bamboozled, right?
Hoodwinked.
You've been hoodwinked, misled, right? Because now we're expecting that. And then we protest if we don't get it. We're upset if we don't get it, right? How are you going to help me? Well, wait a minute. The question is, how are you going to help yourself, right? How are we going to help ourselves? Because we're only as strong as our weakest link. If you're a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, if you're a billionaire and you have wealth, but you're a part of a poor community, you will be treated like the weakest link, like that community in the circles that you're in, because we're only as strong as our weakest link. Our 1% suffers. Our top 1% suffers because of our bottom 1%. Our bottom 1% suffers because we don't have a collective way to raise them up. All right. And even Martin Luther King talked about this. This is funny, man. We talk about Black History Month, we talk about King, we talk about all that, but we never talk about two speeches. All right. One is your life blueprint. That means, how are you going to develop yourself? And the other one is I Seen the Promised Land, where he talked about collective economics. Now, have you heard that? You heard people talk about King when they talk about that? No, they don't talk about that. They talk about, I had a dream, brotherhood of man.
In
We
fact, I
all
think the
singing
reason why they actually
Kumbaya.
assassinated him is because of the collective economics, but that's another topic for another day.
Correct. That is correct. That's when he got assassinated. His last two speeches, Your Life Blueprint and The Promised Land, are the two speeches of our futures, right? That's again knowledge. If you don't have knowledge, you can't read, you don't learn. So what should parents tell their children? Never without a book. What should parents be? You're an adult, never without a book. Whatever you read. So someone tells me that they're struggling, my question is, what was the last book you read in 90 days? What was the last knowledge you gained in 90 days? What was the last thing you did to make yourself better tomorrow, yesterday? What was the last thing you did in the last 90 days that makes you better for the next 90 days, for the next year, for the next everything? And as we move forward, the Buffalo Center for Health Equity will begin to get in that space where we begin to do personal development. Why? Why are you in that space, Willie? Why should the Buffalo Center for Health Equity be there? You guys are talking about social determinants of health. Yeah, baby. Right? Because ignorance leads to poor health. Lack of knowledge leads to poor health. Right? It leads to poor health. It's one of the major, when you look at all the social determinants of health, housing, transportation, right? Income, right? They're all related to the position you're in educationally, knowledge wise, information, your ability to upward mobile depends on knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
Wow, that's powerful, Dr. Underwood. As we look at learning and the Buffalo Center for Health Equity getting in those spaces, I can't help but think of Black capitalism, right? And my question to you now is, how do we go from low wage, no wage earner to medium high? So someone that may be listening to this podcast and say, wow, I like that. I want to do that. That's absolutely right. But they're at a low income, they're low wage, no wage earner. How do they begin to take part of this capitalistic society and for lack of better terms, pull themselves up by the bootstrap? Because we know that, sometimes government agencies is agency sabotage of our own people. For example, in 1969, Nixon created the Office of Minority Business Enterprise, known as OMBE at that time. Then in 1979, they rebranded it as the Minority Business Development Agency by the Carter administration. But what some people fail to realize is that no funding was allocated to it. Instead, the office was to solicit funding from private sources and other government agencies in order to do the work. So how do we address self-sufficiency in this space? And how do we help the average person that's low wage to no wage earner become medium to high?
Okay, so what's the difference between at the income quartile levels? What's the difference? That is basically the background is education, right? And I don't mean there's a school in education. So you want to be a nurse, you got to go learn nursing, right? That's the bottom line, right? So let's look at that. So there is a shortage of nursing, and a majority of blacks who are in that nurse in hospitals are nurses' aides. Okay, they're mopping the floors, taking out bedpans, and cooking the food. Right, the majority. You go into any hospital in the Buffalo area, the majority of the blacks who are working there, that's what they're doing. So you say, well, how do I go from mopping the floor, taking out the bedpan, or cooking the food? So let's talk about those who are taking out the bedpan. They have made a decision that they would like to be in healthcare. So you say, well, what does it take for me to go from doing this to doing what they're doing, to that $60,000 job there? Traveling nurses get paid $4,000 to $6,000 a week. Traveling nurses, okay? So the nurses are making nice chunks of change. So you say, well, how do I do that? So number one, there's some skills that I have to have. I have to be able to read, I have to be able to write, and I have to know arithmetic. Reading, writing, arithmetic. So I was someone who didn't get that in school for whatever reason. So now I got to get it myself. Okay, now I got to say, if I'm a poor reader, how do I become a better reader? I'm just going to start reading one page a day, just one page a day, right? And I'm going to do that for a month. And then now I'm going to increase that to 2 pages a day, to 3 pages a day. So let's say if you only read one page a day for a year, you have read what? 365 pages, right? If I read 3 pages a day, you see how the math works out, right? You see how it begins. So then you start to say, well, what do I need to do? What skills do I need to have? And you start to get them. And it may take you, if you're that far behind, it may take you 3 years to get the skills, a year to get the skills, right? But we got to be willing to pull up our sleeves, right? Get on our knees and work our land, right? Which is hard work, which is hard work. So now, what if it takes you 5 years to become a nurse and you're 30? So that means you got the next 40 years reaping the benefits of the hard work you put in for 5 years. And then while you're a nurse, you say, wait a minute, we don't have any nurse practitioners who are black at this hospital. Then I say, well, great. I'm going to go on